It is early morning in your yard. A crow lands on the fence post at the edge of the garden, the one that has been there every morning for the past 3 weeks. It sits for a moment, tilts its head left, then right. Its eye, black and precise, moves across the ground below. Then it drops down, picks something up, examines it, puts it back, picks up something else. A twig. Not any twig. A specific one, broken at a specific angle, with a specific length. It carries it to the corner of the fence, holds it underfoot, and begins to strip the bark with its beak, methodical, unhurried, the way a craftsman prepares a tool before use. You have probably seen something like this. You assumed the bird was foraging, improvising, acting on instinct the way birds do. But here is what the research actually says: it is not improvising at all. It is manufacturing. And the reason it is doing that, the precise cognitive mechanism behind it, is something science has studied for decades and still cannot fully explain. This is not a question of whether crows use tools. That has been confirmed, repeatedly, in peer-reviewed literature going back to 1996. The question, the one that keeps researchers returning to the same islands, the same birds, the same behaviors, is how. How does a brain the size of a walnut construct a mental image of an object that does not yet exist, predict what that object will do, build it, and then use it correctly on the first attempt? The papers are there. The footage is there. The mechanism is not. This channel covers bird behaviors that science has documented but cannot fully explain. If that kind of confirmed, unresolved strangeness is what you are here for, subscribe now. Because we are going to end this video with something that has been sitting in the scientific literature for years, a finding from the University of Auckland that, once you understand it, makes everything you thought you knew about animal culture feel like it needs to be re-examined. 1. Most people who watch crows in their yards assume the bird is responding to what is directly in front of it. A problem appears. The bird reacts. If a stick is nearby, it might pick the stick up and probe with it. Opportunistic. Reactive. This is the common assumption, and it is not unreasonable. It is how most animals use tools when they use them at all. The scientific reality is different. Research on Corvus menegeloides, the New Caledonian crow, the species that has become the central subject of this entire field, shows that these birds do not react to problems. They prepare for them. Studies conducted at the University of Oxford and Germany's Max Planck Institute for Ornithology, published in Scientific Reports in 2018, presented 8 wild-caught New Caledonian crows with a puzzle box containing food placed just out of reach. The crows were given only short, separate pieces, individually too short to be useful. 4 of the 8 birds spontaneously combined the pieces into functional compound tools. Not after training. Not after watching a demonstration. On their own, in a situation they had never encountered before. One crow, observed repeatedly across multiple trials, assembled tools from 3 and 4 separate components. This kind of compound tool construction had been documented, before that study, in exactly 2 other groups of animals, humans, and captive great apes. What makes this genuinely strange is this: the crows had to anticipate the properties of an object that did not yet exist. Behavioral ecologist Alex Kaselnik, one of the lead researchers, described it precisely: the birds were predicting what something not yet built would do once built. That is not reaction. That is not instinct in any conventional sense. And the neural pathway by which a bird brain runs that kind of forward simulation is something no lab has yet mapped. 2. Most observers assume that if a crow uses a stick as a tool, it is picking the nearest available stick. The choice looks arbitrary. A twig is a twig. It is not. Researcher Christian Rutz of the University of Oxford, working with a team that attached lightweight cameras directly to the tail feathers of wild New Caledonian crows, cameras weighing 13 grams, roughly the mass of a paperclip, recorded the birds in their natural habitat on the Pacific island of New Caledonia. What the footage showed was systematic material selection. The crows did not pick up random sticks. They evaluated them. They rejected most of what they touched. They selected for specific properties: length, flexibility, the angle of a natural fork, and then, critically, they modified what they selected. Smoothing, trimming, bending. The same sequence, repeated across individual birds. The cameras also revealed a behavior no one had documented before: the birds using grass stems as tools on open ground, poking into nests in the soil for invertebrates. The ecological range of their tool use was broader than any prior study had suggested. What makes this genuinely strange is this selection and modification behavior is consistent across individuals who have never observed each other. Crows raised in isolation, with no exposure to tool-using adults, still show preferences for specific raw materials. The behavior is not purely learned from watching others, but neither is it purely genetic, because the specific choices vary. What is doing the selecting, in the absence of both teacher and hardwired blueprint, remains an open question. 3. Most people assume that if animal tool use is cultural, passed from one individual to another, it would look like direct copying. One bird watches another, imitates what it sees, repeats the behavior. This is how we tend to imagine animal learning. Researchers at the University of Auckland and the University of Cambridge, publishing in scientific reports in 2018, tested a different possibility. They worked with wild New Caledonian crows and investigated whether these birds might transmit tool designs not by watching the act of manufacture, but by storing an internal template, a mental image of what a finished tool should look like, and then manufacturing toward that image. The birds were trained to associate tool items of particular sizes with rewards. When the physical templates were removed, the crows continued to manufacture tools that matched the previously rewarded size. They were not copying a process. They were building toward a remembered standard. The researchers described this as mental template matching, a cognitive mechanism that could, in theory, allow tool designs to be transmitted across generations not through direct observation of manufacture, but through exposure to finished products. A young crow examines its parents' discarded tools. It forms a template. Years later, it builds toward that template, without ever having watched the process. What makes this genuinely strange is this is exactly how cumulative cultural evolution is thought to work in early human technology. The mechanism that allowed our ancestors to refine stone tools across thousands of years may be operating, right now, in the forests of a Pacific island in a species with a brain that weighs, in its entirety, around 10 grams. 4. Most people assume that regional differences in animal behavior reflect ecological differences, that animals in different places do different things because their environments demand different things. In 2000, researchers Gavin Hunt and Russell Gray at the University of Auckland conducted a survey across New Caledonia. They documented 5,550 individual pandanus tools the crows manufacture from the leaf edges of screw pine plants, collected from 21 separate sites across the island. What they found were 3 distinct tool designs: wide tools, narrow tools, and step tools, where the working end tapers from a wide base to a narrow tip in a series of precise cuts. The 3 designs had different geographic distributions. The distributions were continuous. They overlapped at their edges, like dialects meeting at a border. Here is the number that is difficult to sit with: 5,550 tools, 21 sites, 3 designs. And when the researchers examined the ecology, the available plants, the prey species, the terrain, they found no ecological correlates. The environment at a wide tool site is not meaningfully different from the environment at a step tool site. The insects being extracted are not different. The pandanus plants are not different. The only variable that maps cleanly onto the tool design distribution is geography itself, which is to say, population. Which is to say, transmission. Which is to say, culture. What makes this genuinely strange is this: the step tool design is more complex than the wide design. It requires more manufacturing steps, more precision, more time. If there were no ecological pressure driving it, something else drove its development and spread. Something about how information passes between individual crows, between generations, across decades of observation. That process, the mechanism by which a more complex design displaces a simpler one in the absence of clear functional advantage, is one of the core unsolved problems in the study of animal culture. 5. Most people assume that bird intelligence is limited by brain size. A crow's brain is small. Therefore, a crow's cognition, however impressive it looks, must have a ceiling well below what a primate can do. A 2008 study published in PubMed, examining the brains of New Caledonian crows against 4 other corvid species, European carrion crows, magpies, jays, and sparrows, found that New Caledonian crows have significantly larger brains relative to body size than any of the comparison species. They are highly encephalized, even within a family already known for large relative brain size. Further work identified the specific structures involved: an enlarged mesopallium and associative regions, the areas responsible for integration, flexible learning, and what researchers cautiously describe as a prefrontal cortex-like function. A raven's brain weighs around 15 grams. A New Caledonian crow's brain is smaller. But the neuron density in the forebrain regions responsible for higher cognition is comparable to that found in primate brains. Per gram of neural tissue, the processing density rivals that of monkeys. The architecture is different, no layered cortex, but the functional outcome, based on behavior, is nearly identical in certain domains. What makes this genuinely strange is this: the brain structure that supports this cognition evolved completely independently of the primate line. There is no common ancestor, no shared pathway, no borrowed design. The same cognitive outcome, planning, tool manufacture, cultural transmission, causal reasoning, arrived via a completely different architecture, on a completely different evolutionary branch, in a completely different body. This is called convergent evolution. And while the term is clean, the implication is not. If complex cognition can emerge independently in birds and in primates, we have no clear model of what cognition actually requires. We only know what it produces. The crow is back on the fence post. Same morning light. Same methodical tilt of the head. It drops to the ground, selects a twig, not the first one, not the second, the third, carries it to the corner, and begins to work. You know now that this bird is not improvising. It is operating with a mental image of a tool that does not yet exist, shaping a physical object toward an internal standard that may have been passed to it, as an image, from a parent it watched years ago, who received the same image from their own parent, in an unbroken chain of cultural transmission stretching back across decades on an island in the South Pacific. Its brain, weighing 10 grams, is running a cognitive process that has only ever been confirmed in primates and in the ancestors of the species that eventually built laboratories to study it. The yard has not changed. The crow is exactly what it was when you first looked at it. But what it is doing, the full depth of what is actually happening when a bird picks up a twig, sits at the edge of what science can currently account for. Confirmed, documented, peer-reviewed. And still, at the mechanism, unmapped. Have you ever watched a crow in your yard select one object, reject several others, and then actually modify what it picked up, bending it, stripping it, adjusting it before use? I read every comment.